Tony Martignetti, nonprofit radio coverage of 18NTC. That's the Nonprofit Technology Conference in New Orleans, hosted by the Nonprofit Technology Network. This interview, like all our 18NTC interviews, is sponsored by Network for Good, easy-to-use donor management and fundraising software for nonprofits. My guests are James Wu, Kristyna Jones, and Rhiannon Tasker. James is an independent brand consultant. Kristyna is co-founder and COO of Brothers Empowered to Teach, right here in New Orleans. And Rhiannon Tasker is donor communications project manager at the Public Theater. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure to have all three of you. Your workshop topic is branding for the apocalypse. Very ominous. How to get people to care about your cause when everything is horrible. Okay, is the horrible that we're, is part of the horrible that we're thinking about the current political environment and how there's something new every couple of hours? It feels like is a crisis?
Yes.
Is that part of what we're talking about?
That is exactly what we're talking about. And
okay.
that was
is it
certainly
only that, or?
That's the driver of the conversation, and that I remember one day, logging off Twitter for about 30 minutes, coming back on, and literally there were 6 new horrible things that happened that were very much tied to the current political climate in the country.
We just learned a couple hours ago that Paul Ryan is not going to run for the House in Wisconsin.
Wow, there you go.
That speaks something about what's going on, and there's news like that very, very often.
Yep.
Our challenge is to stand out.
Right.
Okay. Apocalyptic, yeah? Rhiannon, apocalyptic?
I mean, I think that the environment that we're in right now is very divided, and no matter how quickly things change and how fast news is happening, it still feels like we're in a very sort of divided world, and the way that we're feeling after post-election, especially no matter what side you're on, it's feeling very divided and very sort of there's a lot of tension right now, and so it feels a little bit tense and uncomfortable sometimes.
Okay, but Kristyna, we can overcome. Your org has done it. I guess you've got some lessons to share.
Yes, I think that we have overcome that because one of the things that we always do, regardless of what's happening politically in the world, is stay true to who we are as an organization. So. Part of, your branding is sort of interpreting that message for what's happening in the world as long as it's a part of who you are.
Okay, so is that your first advice for rising above this noise, is staying true to who you are?
I think so. I think what happens when we have these, something that happens with nonprofits sometimes is that we are always putting out a fire, right? We're responding to a crisis. And in responding to those crises, sometimes we can lose a part of who we are, or staying kind of on message of what we're trying to accomplish or what our mission is. And so I think this is sort of like being, I think I used this on the panel today, it's like being a buoy in a storm, right? So that's my take.
Okay. Oh, so your panel's already done. You're relaxing now.
That's right.
All right, awesome. Congratulations.
Take it easy on us.
All right, congratulations. Yeah, this is fun. This is nonprofit radio. This is not, no gotchas here or anything. Okay, and I gather from the session description, Kristyna and Rhiannon, you've taken 2 different approaches in terms of politics. Kristyna, apolitical.
Pretty much.
Staying mostly apolitical. And Rhiannon, using the arts to be political, using theater to be political.
Yeah, and I think something about the Public Theater is we try and represent all sort of views. We are open to everyone, and we want to tell all stories. And especially in our branding, we did the same thing where we said very true to who we were as an organization and the urgency that people are feeling in the community and the power of storytelling to sort of tell people to share different perspectives, and the power that storytelling really has to help people feel like they understand a different viewpoint than their own, whether that's depending on all sides of the political spectrum. I mean, the Public Theater, being in New York City, we do tend to lean a certain way, but we try to be as open as all voices and all stories, and hopefully help other people understand, especially, as I said, we're divided right now. Helping understand other people and other perspectives helps sort of diffuse the tension and help people come at issues in a different way.
James, I think it's pretty well recognized that storytelling is critical. If we're not a theater group that has a stage, literally.
Yeah.
How can we effectively, compellingly is better, have the story told or tell it ourselves?
Yeah. No, that's a great question, and a
Everybody's
question
waiting.
that
Everybody's
question
got
that
fans.
came.
You guys all have fans. Rhiannon, you didn't have a fan. I don't think.
I have no fans.
Christine and James. No, you both wait. I thought you waited.
New Orleans is a small town.
New Orleans, that's true.
Everybody
You're
knows
home.
each other's
That's
people
true.
in New
You're
Orleans.
home.
You know?
Yes,
Oh, I'm
you're
waving
home.
now.
All right.
There's your cousin.
Yeah, to nobody.
my cousin.
Yeah, there's nobody
No,
coming
that's
by.
James'
Oh, that was
cousin.
legitimate? Okay, I thought you were just trying to make up for not having any fans.
So
How do we do this compellingly?
yeah, no, it's a great question. It's actually a question that came up in our panel conversation today from the audience, and Rhiannon answered it beautifully, and I'll try my best to kind of encapsulate her great response in that at the end of the day, yes, we might not be affiliated with an organization that is in the arts or in theater or uses storytelling as the primary medium or platform, but the work that we're in the nonprofit world is all about human stories, right? It's all about change and transformation within humans and communities that they dwell in, that we serve. And so I think at the end of the day, you might not have art as kind of the channel for telling these stories, but the better you can get at telling very human stories that connect to people at a very human and emotional level, I think that's where you get real power.
How do you drill down into that, getting that, making that connection with the reader or the viewer? Flesh that out a little more.
So I think one of the mistakes that a lot of organizations do is they get caught up in kind of explaining their model. Like, this is our theory of change, and here are all of our programs, right? We invest in building community. We invest in entrepreneurs, whatever it is. We train leaders instead of thinking about why. Like, why do you exist? What is your purpose? What is your reason for being? Right? If you can start there, then you can begin to inspire people in a way that if you start talking about your products and programs, you might lose them, right? So if you can start with why you exist, really drill down and get to your core purpose, I think anyone can really identify with that and begin to resonate with that message.
Okay. Christina, I see you doing a lot of nodding.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we,
Yeah.
Brothers in Power to Teach, unlike the public theater, is only 4 years old, right? And so we're still kind of a startup. But when we first started, it was very much like, this is our model. We have these 3 steps. This is what we do. And people would be like, huh? And so when we started telling the story about why we do the work and why we think the way we do it matters, it was much easier for people to connect. And so I think that that's really, really important.
And you're trying to get black men to go into teaching, right?
Right.
Education.
That's
That's
exactly right.
Brothers.
Yeah.
Brothers empowered to teach.
Brothers empowered to teach, and sister bros empowered to teach. But yes.
Okay. Okay. And now you feel like you're creating a lot of buzz and a lot of conversation around your mission. How are you doing that? This is a way of rising above. You can get people talking about you, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I said today was that, like, show up, right? So we show up to lots of different things, and we show up in lots of different ways. So we participate in lots of activities going on around town related to the issues that we work on, but also on larger issues. Like, there's an initiative in New Orleans called Forward Together, and politicians, nonprofits, people who work in the private sector come together. So we go to those things. We're constantly wearing a B, right? So that's one of the
on your shirt.
Yeah,
yes,
one of the ways we show up.
Okay.
The other way is that
it's on your it's on your shoulder
it's
too.
on my shoulder.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. Not only on your chest, it's on your shoulder too.
You know, we have young people who are very much engaged in the work that we do, and so they do a lot of videos for us. They do a lot of tweeting for us. We do a lot of social activities, so people see us collectively together, and they're like, "What's that B mean? What hashtag Real Bros Teach? What does that mean?" And so that's how we've really driven people to think about us.
Rhiannon, how about the public theater? How are you creating buzz, conversation about the pub?
I mean, the public theater is definitely a growing brand, especially in New York City. We had Hamilton, which was like a huge pub.
You had Hamilton before it was on Broadway?
Yeah, we created Hamilton.
Excellent.
We were the.
Oh, you created it?
Yeah,
Oh,
we
excellent. I
did the
didn't know that.
workshops and like sort of helped incubate that show, and then we did the first production. That was the production that moved to Broadway. So we had a lot of sort of like buzz from that show, and we're now in the place of like, okay, now that Hamilton's sort of moved on, continuing those conversations and keeping us as the forefront of people's mind as a theatrical institution, as well as a civic institution. We hold a lot of talks at our that are hosted through our public forum team at our home in Astor Place. We also are doing them at the Delacorte. We hold other sort of initiatives. We did voter registration was a big thing. We had a table out in our lobby, and we sort of participated with other nonprofit theaters.
Okay, interesting. Voter registration.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something that intuitively I would link with a theater.
Yeah, it was an initiative that was started by, I believe it was Playwrights Horizons. They got theaters throughout the country to set up voter registration booths for when people came and saw shows. They could register for vote while they're like waiting in line or during intermission or after the show. And the idea is just to help people engage civically within their communities and in the country by voting. And we had a huge turnout. We also did some pushes on our social media and through emails, and we got a lot of people registered to vote. And it's our way of sort of helping people just be active within our community and engage socially, not just with the conversations that we're having with the work we're presenting, but just like in the real world, outside of what's on our stages.
James, you're our resident consultant. How can we create conversation and buzz around our work?
I mean, I think
we just heard some great examples, but beyond those two.
I think it does at the end of the day come back to having a clear sense of who you are, but also who your audience is. And we talked a lot today about authenticity, right?
Let's talk about that then.
Yeah,
let's do it here too.
Yeah.
Don't hold out on nonprofit radio listeners. Don't do it.
And I think that the theme of authenticity is something that the three of us keep coming back to, and is a common thread in all of our work. But like Rhiannon said in the beginning, organizations that tend to shift their messaging or change who they are in response to what's happening in the world today without remaining true to kind of their core purpose or kind of their identity, I think there's a real danger there in kind of losing sight of what you're all about and why you exist. I think when you have a clear sense of who you are and, more importantly, how your audience connects with that, then that kind of authenticity shines through no matter what is happening around you. And I'm sure these two can say more about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of the questions we had today, no matter what the question was, are always kind of brought back to that authenticity and who you are and sticking true to who you are, whether it is like a post-election end-of-year campaign where there's a little different urgency within it. It's still about those fundamental things that make your organization what it is. People are going to see right through you if you're trying to like do something urgent that doesn't feel authentic or real, because they don't want to give money to an organization that's not going to do something with it that is fundamental to who they are. Yeah. And so the public theater and we have always stuck true to those values that we are a theater of by and for the people, and that culture belongs to everyone, and we are a place of storytelling, and those are the things that are important to us. And just framing it in the way of the moment of it, whether it's urgency or no matter what it is, it's still those things. And every question we got today, we kept coming back to that authenticity and who you are.
Yeah, because Kristyna, you're not only alienating your mission, but you're also alienating your core supporters.
Right. I mean, you're also alienating the people who work for you. Right?
And your employees and your staff.
Right.
Yeah, they have certain expectations. And now we're adjusting just because there's tumult in the political economy.
Right, exactly. I mean, we think of our brand as a person, right? So one of the activities we did when we did our brand refresh was like, okay, if Brothers Empowered to Teach was a person, who are they?
User persona. Is this James? Is a user persona or a?
I think that's part of it. Certainly part of it.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
And so we kept coming up with all the things that we already do that sort of reinforce who we are as a person. So we're a 20-something creative, collaborative, fresh and fashionable group. Right?
What do we read? What do we listen to?
What do we read?
Right?
What do we listen to? Our podcast, is all about those things. It connects our brand to people who want to hear about the work we're doing in more detail, and it translates into the photos we take and to our website. All of those things signify that.
But I think, Tony, you just used an interesting word a minute ago, and that was expectation. And I think that's one thing that we actually didn't talk a lot about directly today, but certainly was a theme that I see woven in a lot of the work, especially the tactics that both of your organizations have used in the past year. And it can be something as small as the public theater and their year-end fundraising campaign last year, instead of their typical we're just going to send email after email appeal at the end of the year asking for our audience to give us money, they actually hand wrote notes on postcards thanking people for their contributions, for their engagement. A very analog, old school approach in this very hyper, social media, digital world. And they saw a huge bump in terms of or hoping to see a big bump in terms of renewals, but did see a big bump in terms of engagement just in response to that tactic, so that kind of analog, very old-fashioned, if you will, approach was really cut through the clutter when you're just getting bombarded on social media and email today. And similarly with Brothers in Power to Teach, I think one of the things that was really interesting when they were going through their brand refresh, they had an exercise where they're looking at something as mundane as colors. What should our color palette be that represents our visual identity? It's a very standard part of any branding exercise, but the way that they thought about colors was really provocative for me, and I should probably just let Kristyna tell the story herself. But essentially, what I heard was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that
Wait, I'm going to cut you off.
Yeah,
Kristyna,
tell the story. Thank you. You
Go ahead.
So our color palette is soft, and vibrant. So it's yellow, teal, like a lavender, and a cool gray, right? And the reason for those colors is because we did this today. We had all
teal, like your earrings.
Yes,
you got it down. You got it down to the earrings.
Essentially.
Okay.
We had everybody close their eyes and say and think to themselves, not necessarily share. Like when you think of a young black man, what do you see, right? And so when they open their eyes, I said the reason these colors are the colors they are is because they signify liveliness and collaboration and nurturing. So a softening of the idea of who a young black man is, because we want people to see young men as nurturers, right? As having the potential to nurture. So that's why our color palette is the way it is.
We talked about this idea of I used to come from the international development world, and this expression or phrase called poverty porn. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's kind of this, in our imagery, we either use really negative imagery that's very exploitive in an effort to raise money and awareness, right? So malnourished kids in sub-Saharan Africa with flies on their faces, right? That kind of creates this sympathy or pity. On the other hand, the pendulum has swung in the complete opposite direction in the last 5-10 years, where everyone uses just images filled with happiness and optimism and joy. And I feel like there needs to be a recalibration. Again, it's something that's kind of in between that presents a more nuanced, complete, whole, and maybe complex picture of what the issues are that we're dealing with in the communities that we're serving. I think that there's a real danger in kind of dumbing down your message or your brand or simplifying it to say, this is who we are, this is what we're all about, and it's kind of playing into what people expect, right? Versus similar to what Brothers in Power to Teach did. And he said, how do we create an image that is more about fostering this nurturing environment? And then also in some of the photographs you see, it's like sometimes it's real struggle and adversity that you see, but sometimes it's real celebration and joy and just the complete humanity that's presented, kind of a whole human being. I think that's something that we don't see enough of today.
Kristyna, what's a home run for you? Is it when someone decides to embark on a career in education? Is that like they decide they major on that in college or what?
Home run out of Shea Stadium, Mets fan, would be if a young man starts with us and doesn't want to teach, and by the time he leaves, he's like, you know what, I'm going to teach. So that's a grand slam. The basic home run is basically a young man who may want to teach but isn't really sure and decides to teach. But we've had a lot of success with guys who had no intention of teaching, because only 3% of all the teachers in the entire country are black men. They don't see themselves in teaching. So the idea that they now see themselves as a teacher or working in education, period, is like phenomenal, really.
Rhiannon, you talked a bit about inclusiveness. Mm-hmm. Say more about that in terms of the public's brand. I mean, how do you feel being inclusive sets you aside from your competition in New York City?
The public theater, it's one of our fundamental sort of missions is to provide theater to everyone, no matter what background you are. And I mean, we do free Shakespeare in the Park, where we give 100,000 tickets to world-class Shakespeare every summer,
Free, right.
all for free.
Right. They're hard as hell to get, too. Former New Yorker.
And we're making, I mean, that's the thing. They are hard to get. People have to wait in line for hours. So we are taking steps to make it easier to get tickets for everyone. So we do distributions in all 5 boroughs. We throughout the week. We'll be in Queens one week. We'll be in Brooklyn. We'll be in the Bronx. We'll be in Staten Island, distributing tickets there so that they don't have to come into the city, wait in line for hours, maybe or maybe not get a ticket, and then wait until the show in the evening. It's a more accessible moment for them to get tickets there. We also now have a digital online lottery, so people can do it from work or from wherever they are. We do a lottery downtown at our Astor Place home, so again, you're not waiting in line. You can come, enter the lottery, get drawn, be quick. We are trying to offer more and more opportunities to help expand who is seeing the theater versus the people who are able to wait in line. We also do the mobile unit, which takes Shakespeare to prisons, homeless shelters, and community centers throughout all 5 boroughs. And we do that twice a year. It used to be once a year. We've now expanded to twice a year. They do 20 stops each tour, and then they come downtown and do a 3-week run at our theater at Astor Place, and all those tickets are also free.
Okay, inclusion.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to talk about? No? That wraps it. Okay, that's good for that. What else can we talk about? You had your workshop. We've got another 5 minutes or so together. What haven't we touched on? Anybody that we want to? Come on, you did 90 minutes.
Questions. I know. We're all talked up.
Questions? Maybe questions you got that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, one thing that didn't come up that some folks asked me after our panel was, it's interesting because you have a very founder-led organization. You're a small organization. You're a young organization. On the contrary, Public Theater has been around for 65 years almost, and their founder is not, directly involved anymore. But Oscar Eustace, who's been there for how long?
It was 10 years when I started, so 12, 13 years.
And he's kind of an iconic institution in and of himself. Yeah. And so, how do you think about brand in relation to a founder's personality? And if you work at an organization that doesn't have a strong founder with that really influences that culture, then what do you do? I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that. But
well, I've worked in prior to my previous career, I was a investment banker in community development, and one organization that I worked for went through a big brand refresh. The founder had long been gone. And what they did internally was sort of do what public theater does with the staff and send out a survey like, who are we? Who do we say we are? Who do you think we are? And who do you think we should be? And they did a whole entire brand refresh based on sort of who's in the building now, who works for the company now, why did they come to this place to work here. And I think they did a great job at rebranding themselves, Enterprise Community Partners. I haven't looked at their branding lately, but a few years ago they did that, and I thought that was a really great way to do it. When you don't have a strong founder culture anymore, the founder your organization has evolved over the years. You've had another executive director, but you still want to stay kind of true to your original mission. I thought that was a great way.
Essentially surveyed the staff.
Surveyed the staff.
Why are you here?
Right.
And I guess, another question, taking that a step further, is that I get all the time is, okay, we were sold, we should go through a branding exercise, a brand refresh, if you will, but how do we get the leaders of our organization on board? How do we get the entire staff on board to really buy into this, so this doesn't just feel like a bunch of pretty words that we stick in a marketing drawer, but it has real impact on how we show up in every department throughout the organization every single day.
So how do we get that buy-in?
Yeah, that's my question. I don't know. I mean, you guys both live and breathe this every single day, and I'm happy to share my thoughts, but
I mean, it's the public theater is such a deeply rooted mission, and Oscar, who is our artistic director, really lives and breathes the mission of the public, and truly the people who work there want to be there and want to be there for the mission of the public. It's nonprofit. You want to be there for that. You want to be there to help give thousands of people free tickets in the park and the work that goes behind it, and to create good work. So we are kind of in a very lucky situation in that we are very, very rooted in our mission and our brand and who we are. And it stems from having a strong artistic director leader who any speech he gives, from like a staff meet and greet to the Delacorte and opening night of Shakespeare in the Park, it is so rooted in who we are and so rooted in the deep belief of who we are. So it really helps everyone in the organization really get behind it, because you know that you're working towards something that for our leader believes in, and also that's something that we believe in as a group and as a theater. Yeah. So we're lucky in that it's so embedded in us as a public theater. I know a lot of theaters don't necessarily even have that. Theater is not something that people think of in these huge, deeply founded missions and values and big. They're broad and really lofty. Of culture belongs to everyone, and theater should be free for all, and all those things that. But there are things to aspire to, and there are things that we all are working towards as an organization.
James, if we don't enjoy that luxury that the public has, can you help us?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I try to teach my clients is that when they're going through a branding exercise, it's really critical to bring the entire organization on board throughout the process, right? There's nothing worse than going through a 6-month rebranding and the leadership says, ta-da, we're done, look at our new brand. Everyone says, what? Like, how come I wasn't heard? How come I didn't get a chance to weigh in or at least share my opinions? And so I think that's a real, the fine line between, a successful branding and a branding that ends up failing. I think it comes down to when you're developing a mission or a purpose statement, if you're developing core values for the organization, that you don't fall into the trap of just choosing empty words, right? We've all seen core values like empathy, innovation, honesty. Well, like who's not going to be honest? Like, who wants to be the opposite of that, right? So those kind of be empty, meaningless core values. How can you create a set of values that really change the way we show up to work every single day? And so one of the things that I do with my clients is after we have this branding, we bring everyone along throughout the process. They're entirely bought in. We say, okay, now we have this new set of values. Now we have this new purpose. Maybe we've written a manifesto. Really look at these words. Break up into your teams. So finance department, accounting department, marketing department, operations team. I want you each to go and meet and look at these words and really understand what they mean and have a conversation about what's going to change. What are you going to start doing more of today that you're not doing enough of? What are you going to stop doing as a result of the language on the words? At the end of the day, a lot of rebrandings come down to language and words, and the intention that you put into those really can go a long way.
Okay. We're going to leave it there.
Okay.
All right.
Right.
They are James Wu, independent brand consultant, Kristyna Jones, co-founder, COO of Brothers Empowered to Teach, and Rhiannon Tasker, donor communications project manager at the Public Theater. Thank you all. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This interview scheduled, sponsored by Network for Good, easy-to-use donor management and fundraising software for nonprofits. Thank you so much for being with nonprofit radio coverage of 18NTC.